All right, buckle up, because we're about to drop you right in the middle of one of the most brutal, chaotic, and downright unforgiving military machines the world has ever seen. No safety net, no time machine escape button, no modern medicine in your back pocket. Just you, a musket you barely know how to load, and about 300,000 men who've been doing this for years. This is 1807. Napoleon Bonaparte is at the absolute peak of his power. Just months ago, his Grande Armée crushed the Prussians at Jena and Auerstedt. Poland is buzzing with French soldiers. The air smells like gunpowder, horse manure, and wet wool. And somewhere out there, the Russian army is getting ready to make things very, very messy. So here's the big question, the one that should genuinely give you the chills. Could you actually survive a single day in this world? Spoiler alert, friend, probably not. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why. Let's say it's around 4 in the morning. You're a regular soldier, a common infantryman, what the French call a simple fantassin. You're not a general, you're not a decorated officer. You're the guy at the bottom of the food chain. And right now, you're sleeping on the ground, not in a tent, not on a cot, on the ground. The ground in January 1807, somewhere in the frozen Polish countryside, is not what you'd call cozy. It's wet, it's hard, and it's cold enough to make your bones ache in ways you didn't know were possible. You've got a thin wool blanket, maybe a coat if you're lucky, and the body heat of the guy next to you, a stranger who smells like he hasn't bathed since October, because he probably hasn't. There was no such thing as a good night's rest on campaign. Soldiers slept in shifts, on the move, in the rain, in the snow, on the side of a road. Sleep when you can wasn't just advice. It was pure survival strategy, and 4 hours was considered generous. A drummer starts beating reveille, and just like that, your day begins whether you like it or not. Does that sound rough? Trust me, we're just getting started. You wake up hungry, starving actually. Your stomach is growling like an angry dog. So naturally, your brain goes, okay, breakfast time, what's on the menu? And here's the punchline that isn't funny at all, maybe nothing. Supply chains in the Napoleonic Wars were, to put it kindly, a disaster on wheels. Napoleon's famous quote, "An army marches on its stomach," sounds great on paper, but the reality of feeding hundreds of thousands of men across hundreds of miles of hostile, war-torn territory was basically mission impossible. Wagons broke down, supply depots got raided, roads turned into mud rivers. On a good day, a French soldier might get his daily ration, a pound and a half of bread, some dried vegetables, maybe a bit of salt meat or bacon. On a bad day, and bad days were extremely common in 1807, he got whatever he could scrounge: roots, berries, old horse meat, grain meant for the horses. That's right, horse meat was a delicacy. If a horse collapsed from exhaustion or cold, soldiers would be on it within minutes. Nothing went to waste, not a single thing. Now you're standing there in the freezing pre-dawn, chewing on something that may or may not have been an animal recently, washing it down with water that has something floating in it, and you've got to wonder, what on earth did I sign up for? As the old saying goes, you reap what you sow. And these men had been sowing chaos across Europe for years. Let's talk about what's actually happening to your body right now. The stuff nobody mentions in the glamorous paintings of Napoleon on white horses. Your feet. Oh, your poor feet. In 1807, soldiers' boots were not ergonomically designed. They were often poorly fitted, made from stiff leather. And here's something wild. They were not made differently for the left and right foot. That's right. The concept of specifically shaped left and right boots wasn't widespread yet. So you've been walking in boots that fit both feet equally poorly, which means they fit neither foot well at all. After days of marching, and the Grande Armée was famous for covering sometimes 30 kilometers a day, soldiers' feet were absolutely wrecked. Blisters on top of blisters. Trench foot from constant moisture. Some men wrapped their feet in rags just to have something between their skin and that unforgiving leather. And speaking of marching, are you actually in shape? A soldier in Napoleon's army walked the equivalent of a half marathon on a regular day, fully loaded with equipment. We're talking a pack weighing between 25 and 30 kilograms. That's around 65 pounds of gear on your back. Musket, cartridge box bayonet, blanket roll, spare clothing, cooking equipment, all of it on your back. Does that give you butterflies? Good. Because we haven't even gotten to the fighting yet. We need to have a real, honest conversation about hygiene, because this is one of those things history books gloss over completely, and it's one of the most immediately overwhelming things you would encounter in this world. The smell of a Napoleonic army camp in 1807 would drop a modern person to their knees. Tens of thousands of men who hadn't bathed in weeks, sometimes months. Hundreds of thousands of horses producing waste constantly. Latrines that were basically just designated spots in the field, if they existed at all. And soldiers with lice, not just some lice, but fully colonized, every single man, industrial-level lice infestations. Body lice were so common that soldiers talked about them the way you'd talk about the weather. Just a fact of life. Now here's something genuinely wild. Did you know that lice were actually one of the biggest killers in this war? Not muskets, lice, because lice carry typhus. And typhus was absolutely rampant in Napoleon's armies. Typhus, dysentery, cholera. These diseases killed more soldiers than battle did. Some historians estimate that disease accounted for 2 to 3 times more losses than direct combat. Let that sink in for a second. You were more likely to be taken out by a microscopic organism living in your shirt than by a Russian grenadier. And nobody knew why. Germ theory wasn't understood yet. Doctors thought disease was caused by bad air, so the medical response was mostly useless. Bloodletting, herbal remedies, prayer. What do you think? Could you handle waking up to that every single morning? Does that not send a shiver right down your spine? You've survived the morning. Cold, hungry, feet hurting, smelling like a barn. Now it's time for the main event, your musket. You've got a Charleville musket, the standard French infantry weapon of the era. Beautiful engineering for its time, also an absolute nightmare to use effectively under pressure. Here's the process for firing it. Pay close attention, because your life depends on every single step. You bite open a paper cartridge with your teeth, tasting gunpowder. Pour a small amount into the pan of the lock. Close the frizzen. Pour the rest down the barrel. Drop the ball in. Use your ramrod to push everything down. Cock the hammer. Aim. Fire. That's 9 to 12 distinct steps. A well-trained soldier could do this in about 30 seconds, roughly 2 shots per minute under perfect conditions. But conditions were never perfect. Rain made the powder wet and the musket useless. Sweat on your hands made the ramrod slippery. In the heat of battle, with men screaming around you and cannons firing 50 meters away, your hands would be shaking so badly that soldiers forgot steps, misfired, or accidentally fired with their ramrod still in the barrel, sending it flying like a javelin. And accuracy? Forget about it. The effective range of a smoothbore musket was about 50 to 80 meters, and even then, hitting a specific target was a long shot. That's why Napoleonic tactics involved marching in tight formations and firing in volleys. You aimed at the mass of soldiers and hoped. You'd essentially be walking toward other people who were also pointing muskets at you. Both sides firing as fast as shaking hands could manage, close enough to see the buttons on their coats. Still think you'd make it through the day? Mid-morning and the column is moving. You fall into line, and you march, and you march, and then you march some more. The Grande Armée's speed was one of Napoleon's great tactical advantages. He moved armies quicker than anyone thought possible, catching enemies off guard constantly. But that speed came at a cost paid entirely by the boots of the common soldier. The roads of Poland and Eastern Europe in winter 1807 were not exactly the Champs-Élysées. Muddy tracks that turned into rivers of brown sludge when it rained, and into iron-hard ruts when it froze. Supply wagons constantly got stuck, horses stumbled, men twisted ankles in hidden holes, and through all of it, the column had to keep moving. Here's something that gets completely lost in history books: the sheer noise of a marching army, the creak and groan of wagon wheels, the clip-clop of thousands of horseshoes, the rhythmic tramp of boots, drums keeping cadence, officers shouting, men singing, because yes, soldiers sang on the march. It was one of the few ways to keep spirits up. French marching songs were famous throughout Europe. Even your enemies knew the tunes. You're marching shoulder to shoulder with men from all over France, and not just France. Napoleon's Grande Armée of 1807 included Poles, Germans, Italians, Dutch, Swiss, a genuinely multinational force. The guy next to you might not speak a word of your language. You'd communicate in gestures, shared hardship, and the universal soldier language of complaints. "Man, this is rough" translates pretty well across any language barrier when everyone's limping. Let's talk about what happens if you get hurt. Not even in battle, just from the daily grind. A sprained ankle, a blister gone badly infected, a fever coming on. Military medicine in 1807 was an evolving science. Napoleon's chief surgeon, Dominique Jean Larrey, was actually a genuine revolutionary. He invented the concept of the flying ambulance, fast horse-drawn medical units that could reach wounded soldiers quickly instead of waiting until after the fight. He pushed for treating soldiers based on need rather than rank. For his time, he was extraordinary, but extraordinary for 1807 and adequate by any modern measure are two very, very different things. Antibiotics didn't exist. Anesthesia as we know it didn't exist. Surgeons used alcohol, opium if they had it, and speed. Speed was the key virtue of a Napoleonic surgeon. An amputation needed to happen in under 3 minutes to maximize survival chances, not because 3 minutes was comfortable, but because longer meant more shock, more blood loss. Infection after surgery killed more people than the original injuries did. Gangrene was horrifyingly common. Surgeons knew to amputate infected limbs, but they didn't know why it sometimes worked. They just knew that sometimes it did. If you got a serious infection in 1807, the honest truth is, you were in deep trouble with almost no recourse. Your best hope was a strong immune system and a solid dose of luck. Can you imagine going through all of that with no real safety net waiting for you? No clean hospital, no antibiotics, nothing. Man, it gives me the chills just thinking about it. Intelligence comes in. The Russians are nearby. The order arrives. Prepare for engagement. And just like that, every ache and hunger pang fades into the background, because now there's something far more immediate to focus on. Artillery opens up first. Those massive cannons hurling iron balls weighing several kilograms over distances of a kilometer or more. The sound of artillery wasn't just loud, it was a physical sensation. The concussion of a nearby blast could rupture eardrums. The ground shook. Horses went wild with terror. Then the infantry advanced, in formation, at walking pace, not running, marching toward the enemy at a measured step, drums beating, officers in front, flags flying. The discipline required for this was extraordinary. Every human instinct screams at you to run, either forward to get it over with or backward to get away from it. Walking at a measured pace toward people who are actively shooting at you required months of conditioned training to override every natural impulse. During the advance, you'd start to see what cannon fire does to a formation. An iron cannonball at high velocity doesn't stop when it hits something. It keeps going, through the first rank, into the second. Gaps appear in the line, and the men close ranks and keep walking. That was the training. Close the gap. Keep walking. Grape shot was different. A cannon loaded not with a single ball, but with dozens of smaller projectiles, like a giant shotgun blast. At close range, absolutely devastating to dense formations. And still, close the gap, keep walking. Your officer is on horseback watching for anyone to break, because if one man runs, others follow, and a broken formation is a finished formation. The psychological control of officers was just as critical as the physical discipline of the soldiers. Does your stomach drop just reading this? Because it absolutely should, friend. If the lines got close enough, and often they did, it came down to bayonets and sheer physical confrontation. The bayonet charge was one of the most psychologically terrifying moments in Napoleonic warfare. A wall of men advancing at a jog, screaming, bayonets fixed, drums hammering at double time. Here's a historical detail that surprises most people. Actual bayonet-on-bayonet combat was relatively rare. The vast majority of the time, when one side fixed bayonets and charged, the other side broke and ran before contact was made. It was a psychological weapon as much as a physical one. The side that didn't run won. But when it did happen, when two formations actually collided, it was savage, close, and very fast. Musket stocks used as clubs, bayonets as spears, officers with swords, noise, smoke, the press of bodies. The smoke. Let's talk about the smoke for a second. When thousands of muskets and dozens of cannons fire simultaneously, the smoke produced is immense. Contemporary accounts describe battlefields disappearing into a fog of white gunpowder smoke so thick that officers lost sight of their own men. Soldiers fired in the direction of muzzle flashes because they literally could not see the enemy. The confusion was total. In that chaos, your training was everything. Your unit was everything. The stranger next to you, the one who smelled like he hadn't bathed since October, he was your lifeline right now. You covered him. He covered you. That was the whole deal. Evening. Cold settling in hard. In eastern Poland in February 1807, cold means serious business. Well below freezing, wind cutting through wet wool like it isn't even there. If you're lucky, your unit has found a village to billet in. You're sleeping in a barn or a farmhouse, or at worst a stable. The locals are not happy about this. The relationship between an occupying army and the civilian population was complicated, tense, and unpleasant for everyone. If you're not lucky, you're making camp in the open, building a fire if wood can be found, huddling with your unit for warmth, sentries posted. And here's a job nobody wanted, standing completely still in the freezing dark for 2 hours on watch. Frostbite was a real and constant threat. Falling asleep on watch was a court-martial offense, in theory. In practice, exhausted men fell asleep on watch constantly, and in a well-functioning unit, the sergeant would give you a rough shove and a quiet warning rather than haul you before a tribunal, unless something went wrong. Then, heaven help you. Food, if it existed, was cooked over the fire.
I said move out,
Something
soldier.
hot made a profound psychological difference. The simple act of sitting around a fire, holding something warm, hearing familiar voices in the dark. You'd be talking with the guys in your unit, complaining. And soldiers always complained. It was as fundamental to military life then as it is today. Talking about home, wondering how long this would last, making jokes that wouldn't make sense to anyone outside this specific group of men who'd been through the same things together. There was a real brotherhood inside all of that misery, a bond forged in shared hardship that didn't need words to express. So, could you survive 24 hours in the Napoleonic Wars? Honestly? With no preparation, no prior physical conditioning, no experience with the weapons, no immunity to the diseases that were everywhere, no mental framework for that level of sustained hardship. It would be extremely, genuinely rough.
He's right.
Not impossible,
They don't care about
but
us
rough
back
in
in
ways that are hard to fully imagine from the comfort of modern life. The men who did survive, and many did, through campaigns lasting years, weren't just lucky. They were adapted, physically hardened, mentally toughened, bonded into units that function like extended families. There's an old saying that fits these soldiers perfectly. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. They live that in the most literal possible sense. And here's the gut punch of it all. Most of these men were just regular guys, your age maybe. Guys who grew up on farms or in workshops, who had families, who had plans for their lives that had nothing to do with marching across Europe in the snow. History handed them an extraordinary set of circumstances, and they rose to meet it, imperfectly, painfully, but undeniably. So next time you're stuck in traffic feeling frustrated or complaining about a rough day, just take a second. Think about some 19-year-old soldier standing in frozen mud at 4 in the morning in Poland in 1807, wrapping his feet in rags, loading his musket, and putting one foot in front of the other. He didn't know how the story ended. He just kept going. That's something worth thinking about. Hit that like button, drop a comment telling me which part gave you the most respect for these soldiers. And if you want to go deeper into life during the Napoleonic era, the playlist is right here waiting for you. See you in the next one.